Our goal at Interview Valet is always to maximize your ROI, your return on investment. And this is both in the dollars you invest and the time you invest on podcast interview marketing. Now, one of the questions that people often ask us is, well, how do you measure that return on investment? Well, from that standpoint, there's two things. There's qualitative and quantitative. Now, with that, we have access to what the host says, what you say about it. But as far as the back-end analytics and measurements, we rely on you for that and also to share what's working, what's not working, so we can continually get better. In this video, I want to share with you some different aspects that you can look at to judge how things are working. These are things we've gotten from clients and different areas that you may focus on based on what's most important to you. You know, there are different people that come onto podcast interview marketing for different reasons. Some of them are authors that want to launch a new book. Other ones are coaches that want to build practices and masterminds. We've got brands that really want to get new leads and customers in. Some are speakers that just want more opportunity. So all of those have different things they're focusing on, and I want to touch on some of those right now. First, let's talk about qualitative versus quantitative. Qualitative is that feel that you get. So a lot of our customers will say, that was a great interview. I felt like I really connected with the host. I felt like I really gave my message there. Even before it goes live, you sort of got that qualitative feel from that. Or the people that say to us, and I felt like I've gotten a lot more leads, or I've had a lot more discussions with people. My social media interactions, they feel like they're getting better, that I'm getting more opportunities, I'm getting seen by more people. Now, that's hard to qualify that as a number on return on investment. But a lot of people, that's their gut feeling, and that's how they judge it. Now, there's also the quantitative, and I love some of the customers we work with because they know their numbers. So, for example, software as a service companies, they know their cost of lead acquisition and their cost of customer acquisition down to the penny. And we'll get into how they do that. But they're the ones that come back to us and say, this is where podcast interview marketing lines up compared to our traditional marketing. Things like paid ads or conventions, things like that. And they're the ones that always tell us this is the best source of return on investment for their leads and their customers. Another client we have, I love accountants because they know their numbers. Craig Cody is a client that's been with us over 2.5 years, and he reported publicly at PodFest this year that at 12 months, he had a 600% return on investment, and at 24 months, he had a 1,200% return on investment. And that was just based on current sales, not the lifetime value of the customer. And he is very meticulous about measuring where all of his clients come from, and we'll talk about that later on too. But first thing to look at is, why are you doing podcast interviews? What is your overarching goal? And think about these as you measure what success, what return on investment looks like for you. For some people, they'll say, I can measure that by traffic. With traffic, you could go to a site like Google Analytics, there's some plugins for your website, and you could graph it out and look and say, as I'm doing podcast interviews, does my traffic go up? Now, you could look at the traffic to the dedicated welcome page. If they're going to that page that you promoted, you know they came to it from the podcast interview. But even if people don't remember that specific page, they may come to your site. And we've seen this with clients where they'll superimpose their traffic with when the podcast interviews launch. And you can see little spikes in the traffic every time they get placed or heard on a podcast interview. So that's the thing that you can look at on traffic. And that traffic is going to help something called your Alexa score. And the Alexa score is just how popular you are among all podcasts. When they go to rank you with other podcasts, other websites, yours will start showing up. So for example, Wikipedia is probably in the top 5 of all podcasts. So of all websites. So Wikipedia probably has an Alexa score of under 5. For example, Interview Valet, our Alexa score right now is about 500,000, which means we're the 500,000th most popular site. So that extra traffic is going to help you get found for organic traffic, and people are just looking. Another thing is you can track on return on investment is your authority. Now remember, every time you're on a podcast interview, they're going to give you a follow link back. And the authority is called a Moz score. You can go online and just Google what your Moz score is. There's some free checkers out there. It's a logarithmic scale from, I think it's 0 to 7. The higher the number, the better. And so a lot of our clients have said that their Moz score goes up with podcast interviews. An example is Aaron Walker, View from the Top. His name was the same as a professional football player, so he had some competition there, and his company name was the same as a bad movie from the, 90s. So he had a really hard time ranking for that. But as he got more and more backlinks, all of a sudden his content, his page, his name started to show up on page 1 of the Google rankings. So that's a way to look at return on investment. Another quantifiable way is reach, right? How many people are seeing you? How many people are interacting with you? A great way to look at this is social media. Are your social media interactions, followers, requests going up? That means people are getting out there and seeing you. That's one of those numbers that you can point to. Another one is your list. When people come to your site, and if you gave them a small yes or a medium yes that caused an opt-in, that's another thing that you can see. Is your list growing with this? Now, before we had talked about how you can actually put a dollar amount to it. And this is something called closed loop marketing. So most people don't do this. Most businesses don't do that. But for every dollar they spend in marketing, they say how many leads come back from this. So if we spent X amount of dollars at a conference or convention, how much business can we tie back to that? If we spent so much on podcast interview marketing, how much can we attribute to that? Now, there's 2 ways you can really do it. One is an automated way. So if your system is set up to do this, you could tag every lead that comes to you from your welcome page as attributed to podcast interview marketing and your appearance on that podcast. So as they go through, you could figure out what the cost of the lead is, and when they close as a customer, you could attribute that back. If you've got a system set up, Infusionsoft can do it, HubSpot can do it. Some of those, you can set that up so that it will actually tell you. Now, granted, it's not 100% because if they come through the homepage, that may not catch them and attribute them. Another thing that you can do, even if you don't have an automated system, is to ask people. And that's one of the things Craig Cody did. He would always ask, how did you find out about me? Now, he knew what page they converted on, but then he would ask his customers too. Because sometimes they may not go to that page right away, but I heard you on this podcast. Or often I get told, I heard you on a podcast. So it's hard to attribute it to a single one because sometimes they might have to hear you on 1 or 2 shows before they actually go there. But that's a great way to do it. When you're having any discussions, be it sales discussion, a lead, somebody follows you, just ask them, hey, how did you find out about us? And this is a best principle for anything because that will show you what's working and what's not working. You see, with this type of marketing, it's more of a marathon than a sprint. It's more an investment than a spend. If you spend $1 on Facebook advertising, you'll know within 6 hours who saw you and where it came back from. If you spend money on a advertisement in a newspaper, they're only going to see it for a day, so you'll know what the response to that was. But for us, it's really it's an investment, right? You're planting seeds, and those won't pop up right away. We had somebody called me one time, and he had done one podcast interview, and a week later, he's like, I haven't seen any traffic from this. Well, it hadn't even posted yet. So by that time, it was only the host and probably the editor that had heard that. But 2 months later, he was getting traffic from it. And this traffic is out there. We've got clients now that are out over 4 years, and they still get traffic, leads, conversions from what they put out there years before. I heard somebody said podcast interviews like a can of soup. A can of soup is good for 2 to 4 years. And I think the same thing is with podcast interviews out there. So as you're going through this and you're looking at the return on investment, is what I'm doing working? I encourage you to look at two things, qualitative and quantitative. The qualitative is, does this feel like it's working? Does it feel like it's connecting? Am I getting good feedback from the host, from those initial interviews that I do? And then the quantitative is something to make sure that you put the numbers behind it. So run the Google Analytics report to see what the traffic is. Run your Moz score once a month to see how it's improving. Look at your social media numbers. Are they going up? When you get sales of a product or a product or sign up a new client, ask them where they came from. Or even if you're selling a book, look and see as you get the graphs from wherever it is, Amazon or your publisher, do you see spikes that correlate with your podcast interviews? It's a great way to figure out what is working, and return on investment is what it's all about. You see, I'm an engineer by degree, and when I first started out in sales and marketing, I was always amazed when people would say 50% of the money we spend on marketing or advertising doesn't work. We just never know what 50%. So if you spend money on a newspaper ad, a convention, so many different things out there, sometimes it's hard to figure out, did that actually work? That's one of the things I love about podcast interview marketing. You can go back right away to the qualitative, the feel, but also the quantitative further on and figure out what that return on investment is. If you've got any ideas how you have quantified or qualified your return on investment, please share those with me. We always learn from our clients. What's ordinary to you is amazing to us. I hope this helped. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to your concierge. They're your champion, your account manager. If they don't know the answer, they can find somebody inside that does know the answer.